Hey everyone, and welcome to Pathfinder, a podcast by Payload, the leading digital media company in the space industry. I'm your host Mo Islam, and my guest today is Sid Dixit, a space executive who was most recently CTO and VP of Engineering and Product Management at Maxar Technologies. He previously held senior roles at Amazon and Maxar, so we spend the day picking Sid's brain on all things EO from the market, technology, current financing trends, and general challenges. Stay tuned for a great episode, but first, a word from our sponsors. You don't need to sign any NDAs to know that manufacturing, testing, and operating spacecraft is really hard work. With so much at risk, shouldn't your team have a secure and easy-to-use operating system to manage those high-stakes programs? Epsilon 3 was purpose-built for this. The cloud-based platform supports a wide range of operational procedures that require extreme efficiency and control. Innovative teams at NASA, Blue Origin, Redwire, and Firefly Aerospace use it to plan, execute, and automate their most complex workflows. In addition to top-rated technology, customers get the full support of Epsilon 3's dedicated implementation, integration, and support teams. Unlock your team's full potential to start driving mission success. Sid, thank you very much for being on the show.
Likewise, Mo. Always nice to chat with you and talk about our common passions.
Well, you've had quite the career. Without going too far back, because we could talk about it for some time, but you've held senior roles at Planet, Amazon, and Maxar. Maybe just to kick things off, give us a little bit on each and how you ultimately ended up as CTO of Maxar.
Let me start by saying I'm a space fan, and I've worked at the intersection of Earth observation and artificial intelligence and related technologies for the last 10 or so years. I'll start with my journey at Planet. I used to work at Microsoft, where I built and launched Surface tablets, and there was an opportunity to lead the launch of 150 satellites in space to build the largest constellation. And when that opportunity presented, I was like, simply, who can miss this opportunity to be part of something revolutionary and game-changing in space industry? That started my space journey there. I joined Planet. It was probably like 60, 70 people company. And over the course of next few years, we ended up launching 150 or so satellites, building the world's largest constellation, acquiring Google's Skybox Imaging and Blackbridge, the Canadian company with Rapid Eye Constellation, and ultimately built a company which went IPO in 2021. And it was start of my passion with not only building and launching satellites, but building large data platforms which handle humongous amount of data to be able to process things using artificial intelligence and machine learning, such as computer vision. That passion continued in my journey at Amazon, but I had an opportunity to build not only devices such as robots and Amazon Alexa and Echo Shows, but build a large platform to collect millions of data points, curate them, tag them, label them for machine learning and training, and create a data pipeline to be able to build algorithms and deploy it into production, building one of the largest AI ML platform in operations in large tech. And then after 4.5, 5 years, there was a unique opportunity where I was being hired, presented by the same search firm which placed me at Planet, to go and do this for Maxar Technologies. Maxar at that time was looking for somebody to build a geospatial platform which can transform the way the business is done for them and take the conventional approach of selling satellite imagery as data bricks to convert that into a platform-driven, SaaS revenue-driven platform where you take satellite imagery and sell it data as a service, software as a service through APIs and UI, but not only build and also build an artificial intelligence and machine learning platform to get insights out of this data. I joined there as a VP and ended up building and launching Maxar's geospatial platform, and then finally left as the CTO for the company. after private equity acquisition.
So there's we're definitely going to unpack a lot of the things you've mentioned, especially on the technology side, on the acquisition side. But actually, before we talk about Maxar and EO, I do want you to share a little bit about the robotics work that you did at Amazon, because that was particularly interesting to me when we first met. So yeah, tell us a little bit about what you've built, because I actually wasn't even aware that that product existed in market.
It's a very fun story, Mo. And, I was a few months into my Amazon journey, and there was a secret project being started, and I was being recruited internally for that. And little did I realize this would turn out to be a monumental project. It was a project called to build a product called Amazon Astro. And what Astro is a small home robot and a small business robot, which does a number of things for you. So think about a use case where there's a small robot and you went to a tire shop to get your tires changed, and it comes to you, hey, instead of you standing in a line to give your keys and get your appointment, to your appointment, it comes to you like, hi, Mo, how are you doing? Welcome. I see you have a tire change appointment. And then you say, yes, I do. Please drop the keys at the back of my caddy, and I'll take it to the technician. But hey, by the way, would you like to get your brakes changed? And that was the robot we ended up building. But the most funny story I have around that robot is as follows. Most of this development happened between 2018, 2019 to 2021. And this was time of pandemic. And I also had my youngest son born, who's now 4.5 years old. So literally the robot and my son started to grow together. And my youngest son used to think like he's a family member. He will play with it. He will dance with it. Eventually, the robot became so intelligent that it will hear my wife come down the stairs, intercept her in the kitchen, and say, "Hi, Chubby, how are you doing? I haven't seen you for a while." But that was the journey of being part of the team which built Amazon Robot Astro. It's available on Amazon from homes and small businesses.
So what ultimately led you to decide, well, building robots for fun, but I got to get myself back into Earth observation?
Things I did for robot got me even more passionate for some of my unfinished business in Earth observation. I always wanted to take the very latest and greatest of artificial intelligence techniques and platforms to manage and handle large volumes of data and modernize that space. What better opportunity to take that learnings and apply them for the highest resolution satellite imagery at Maxar. So when that opportunity presented, it was a no-brainer for me to go contribute to such a monumental project. We ended up building and launching Maxar geospatial platform as part of that journey.
Well, let's talk real quick about the acquisition. So because that was a pretty significant one, and I do think it caught a good chunk of the industry by surprise. So it was May 2023. Advent and BCI, two institutional kind of PE firms, acquired Maxar for about six and change billion. At the time, Maxar hadn't launched its Legion constellations yet. There was a number of delays. The company had about $1.5 billion in revenue in 2022. Obviously, we don't know how the 2023 ended, but I just want your general sense, and I obviously need to being respectful of the fact that you were an exec and that I don't want to put you in a complicated position, but why do you think Advent and BCI acquired Maxar? Why don't we start there?
So before I answer that question, I'm a farmer. I no longer work at Maxar, and of course, bound by the confidentiality agreements and respect for the company. So I'll answer this as a private citizen, and I think something to reflect on the larger Earth observation industry. I think there's a great opportunity in Earth observation industry to be able to capitalize on number of things. Basically, there are a few large players which have direct inbuilt relationship with governments across the world. They have customer intimacy. They have well-developed go-to-market channels, basically, and they have technology which is great, but can be tilted towards and further improved upon. Then there is a lot of fragmentation in the industry. So there are a lot of small players with multiple point solutions. There are a number of Earth observation players. I think it is only bound that the industry is going to see some consolidation. It is go through acquisitions, and I think the larger strategy is to serve broadly both commercial and defense customers, serve internationally. And I think some of these acquisitions allow you to do all of this, plus bring the very latest and greatest of technology to grow the size of the pie, basically. So I think, yes, it could be surprising news as when these acquisitions happen in the industry. But I think this is the beginning. I think, you know, I would expect there could be more consolidations. Again, this is purely my personal opinion as I see an hyper fragmented industry.
So, well, you answered my second question, so I'll move on to my third, which is, what do you think Advent and BCI's end goal is here? Do you expect, a $6.5 billion, acquisition? At the time, a lot of folks argued that, hey, this was a great bailout for the current shareholders, given the share price of where the company was taken out at. Do you think that the current owners intend to bring the company back into public markets? Do you think this is a potential sale down the line? And if so, who buys a company like this? Any thoughts there?
Mo, I'd say there could be in the realm of little bit of speculative, but let me try to answer this briefly. I think not particularly with this, entity, but in general, the goal post acquisitions is to increase the pie, grow the value of the company, and then find whether it's a public exit or a private exit. Those are the options on the table, especially when you're talking about multi-billion-dollar deals. So there aren't any surprise options out there, and I think in this particular case, these are some of the most esteemed companies in the business who have driven this acquisition. What they allow to bring on the table is very best in market development, very best in leadership, very best in talent development, very best practices, which have been successful industry across industries. And I'm very optimistic that this is going to drive the growth of the market, the value of the pie, the intrinsic value. I think the company, as I have been watching from outside, has been successful in launching first of their Legion satellites, and that's a testament to the positive outlook which is being practiced there. So, congrats to the company. I'll always continue to cheer from the outside, but I see great things.
Right. Okay. Fair answer. So, taking a kind of step back, looking at the industry as in general, maybe describe what your thoughts are on the current state of EO. Who's succeeding? Who isn't? Maybe why don't we start there?
So let's take I'll want to take a 30,000 foot view, or maybe I should call it like a 600 kilometers view on the Earth observation industry, right? And even let's take a step back even further and go further and see how the space industry is evolving, basically, right? I think once we establish that baseline, will be very useful in analyzing how Earth observation industry would do, because there are many parallels to it in the mainstream tech, right? So overall, the space industry, by going by the dimension of number of spacecrafts, basically in space, is going through a rapid transformation. When we built and launched like 150 plus satellites in space around 2015, 2016 timeframe, it was the world's largest constellation of space. Like, that record is far broken. In 2013, there were no more than like 1,100 or so odd spacecrafts in orbit. I could be off by a number, but that's preliminary research. By the time you go to 2033, 20 years thing, that's going to be over 60,000 such objects in flight, if not more, in space, which is like a humongous, somewhere between 50 to 55-fold increase, basically. Now let's translate that into Earth observation industry. Since then, it has been much easier and cheaper to build satellites. And this trend is going to continue forward for two or three different reasons. Number one, there's a miniaturization technology. We all know about everything is smaller and cheaper and to build, and from CubeSats to mid-size sats to different thing. But then there are two more trends which are going to rapidly accelerate, and these are fairly new in last 1 year. Now, the second trend is generative tools to write software, basically, right? It was very complex to write software to manage satellites and spacecrafts and do things. But with Copilot and Augment Code and Devin, the new auto encoding tools, it's going to be increasingly much, much, much more faster to be able to write the software. Third thing, which is happening in the Earth observation or even in space industry, is just like we have tools to be able to write software, fast forward 2 years, 3 years down the line, we'll have tools to be able to design hardware. Think about auto hardware tools which can design from reaction wheels to attitude determination system controls to design the exact size and layout of the panels to everything. So this trend is simply going to accelerate. The number of satellites are going to be much larger. And the cost of launching satellites is already down with reusable rockets from SpaceX. I think a number of rocket launchers are also developing such technologies, such as Indian Space Research Organization or a number of others, countries and European space agencies. So what's the net out of this, right? Hey, we will have at least 60,000 spacecrafts by 2033. That number could be 70 or 100K also, depending on how the technology increases. Coming down again from that view to again a 30,000 view, you will have very different kind of satellites in orbit. So you'll have electro-optical satellites, you will have synthetic aperture radars, you have thermal satellites, you'll have hyperspectral satellites, you'll have RF satellites, and there would be satellites with specialized sensors which could now be launched and built very cheaply, right? So what would it do to overall to the industry? Every time we see, let's draw the parallels to cloud compute industry, right, or internet industry. Hey, the cost of web hosting was like humongously high in late 90s, right? The cost of cloud storage was humongously high. The cost of cloud compute was humongously high. All these costs are continuing to bring down. Like you can get, cost of internet communication has come down. Similarly, the cost of Earth observation data is bound to come down. It will create a situation where 5-10 years down the line, you'll have a humongous volume of data and humongous diversity of data. So Earth as our precious planet, when we launch Planet's constellation for the first time, we can image it every day. Now it's going to be imaged thousands of times a day by a cluster of satellites. So I'll pause there to a mega trends, and then we'll go to micro trends there.
Sure. Well, a number of things to talk about, but I want to get one question out of the way, which is a question that I've heard a whole host of varying opinions on, but or I should say, people kind of fall on one side or the other of the coin, which is SpaceX. I'm curious that if you agree or disagree with the idea that SpaceX will own LEO, and just curious what you think that impact is going to be on the Earth observation industry. Or maybe let's talk a little bit about that and Starlink and Starshield and just general, like what SpaceX is doing with LEO kind of manufacturing.
There is a fair chance that SpaceX can, or I should rather say SpaceX would be a major player in LEO, right? They have proven the propensity to be able to build and launch thousands of satellites. I mean, we are looking at Starlink satellites, which are in multi thousands right now. And that has completely changed the dynamics of internet connectivity from space business completely. Like radically changed on commercial space. The revenues, if I read it correctly, is nearing $5 billion a year. Like that's no small feat. What it took for conventional players to do that over 20 years, now they have done this in like 5 years, right? I think SpaceX have made their plans clear to be able to go after defense and intelligence business and government business. There's a huge opportunity to be able to provide internet connectivity for these such players. And I think that's something bound to happen, and they have a very strong foot in there. But there's one more aspect of it. The way they have designed their satellites is very modular. They have designed as a bus and a payload, and they have shown propensity to be able to manufacture a large number of satellites. There's nothing stopping SpaceX to be able to replace their um, payload, which is an internet and RF connectivity payload, with optical payload, with hyperspectral payload, with SAR payload. With SAR is more complex. It requires a complex area of antennas and other subsystems, but thermal payload and RF payload, and provide multi-sensory data, provide internet connectivity for both assets on the ground, but internet connectivity for assets in the space. And most importantly, reduce the latency. And I want to talk about what does reducing the latency means, and that changes the game of the industry, right? Say, hey, let's imagine a defense use case. A sat Earth observation provider is taking mission critical images from a place of where active war or situation is going on. Now, when a satellite takes these pictures, it has to find the next ground station to download it. The typical orbit is 90 minutes. You may do it every 90 minutes, or you may intercept either Amazon's ground station or some of your own multiple ground stations do less than 90 minutes. But there's going to be a lag, whether it's 10 minutes to 90 minutes. That applies for most of the players now, right? And with SpaceX, you have a web of satellites circling there as a hexagon, all interconnected. You're going to transmit that information for the speed of light. That latency going from hours to minutes to seconds completely changes the game. So they have the infrastructure. Can they match that infrastructure with different kind of Earth observation payloads? Absolutely, they can. And will they? That's to be seen. But it seems like a very real possibility. Combine it with the reusable rockets where they can build and launch their own payloads multiple times a week. You're looking for a perfect storm to engulf the industry.
So if they do end up going after the remote sensing market, what do you think happens to all the commercial startups that are operating in LEO right now?
We started by talking about the space of space is starting to get crowded, and no pun intended here. There are advantages and disadvantages of doing that. When SpaceX builds and launches their own satellites, let's say for Earth observation, that doesn't mean it cannibalizes all the business of all the startups, right? So let me talk about one of the startups called PeerSight, basically, right? It's a startup funded by Techstars, and that's recently raised $6-7 million funding. But what are they doing? They're building a vertical application to use SAR imagery to do a maritime solution, basically, which combines SAR imagery, electro-optical imagery, AI signals, and be able to provide illegal fishing and other such things, right? Now, I don't think so SpaceX is going to directly cannibalize such startups which are building a fully integrated vertical application. They know their customers very well, have customer intimacy, and understand the pain points. But what it may do is, in fact, assist them. There's companies such as these no longer has to launch an EO satellite, an AI sensor satellite, and a SAR satellite, all of that own, but provide them data cheaply enough to be able to build rapid solutions for their customers and do what they do best, which is focus on their core competence. So startups like these are going to survive. But if you think about companies which purely are going to be in the space of like startups or otherwise, selling data as data breaks or data as a service, right? I think if you see more proliferation of Earth observation satellite, that is going to be a market where the cost of data is continuously going to come down over the next few years. And I'm drawing analogies purely from cloud compute and internet things like, like the Moore's law, which applies to semiconductor, is also going to apply to space in some way, shape, or form, where cost per kilometer of satellite imagery is starting to come down as more and more satellites are available for cheaper and cheaper price points in space.
So we've spent some talking more about the supply side and the technology. I want to talk a little bit about demand. So the common color that we're hearing and supported by the earnings calls, like recent earnings calls of the public companies, is the slowing pace, or like the much slower pace of commercial demand. So curious, what do you think about commercial demand in the industry? Is it where it should be right now, or is what you or maybe what you predicted while you were at Maxar and Planet where it would be today? And if not, sort of where are the commercial customers?
I think with the most recent downturn, there was certainly, my sense has been that when it comes to order of priorities for Earth observation data, it's not on the highest order for many big tech companies. So imagine companies like Facebook, Google, Microsoft, Amazon. As you have noticed, like these companies have been uh, going on, I've called it like voluntary margin expansion, basically, where they have improved their cost structures and reduced their cost, and now they continue to tend to be hugely profitable. They have improved their margins. Often, the demand for Earth observation becomes is one of the factors which is scrutinized. What does that mean? Basically, let's say that Google is gulping data from two or three or four major players. Basically, they will still buy imagery. They might just buy from one or two highest resolution imagery providers, basically, but cut down multiple suppliers where they were buying every available data on the market, right? So those things are playing out. The demand has certainly softened. But I want to drive to the other tail end of it, basically, and which is very interesting. It's the rise of generative AI and these large language models, which have now become large audio models and large image models, basically. There's an increasing trend on the commercial side to do what is being done for rest of the imagery, to recognize humans, object traffic, and everything on Earth, to do the same thing for geospatial. In fact, many of the models like ChatGPT 4.0 have already done that, where they can substantially recognize things from satellite imagery. So that there is a increasing trend for training data, which is now how much do these two trends balance out is to be seen. I think overall it's a very exciting juncture, where finally there are more use cases which could be solved using generative AI, and that will eventually drive the demand back up.
Well, let's hone in on technology a little bit. So, maybe talk a little bit. So, okay, let's actually start with the current startups. Like, there's a number of startups out there, optical, SAR, hyperspectral, all sorts of different types of imagery, and at different resolution qualities, right? Especially on the optical side, it's like 50 centimeter, 30 centimeter. Now, folks working in VLEO at 10 centimeter. So, like, are the startups that you've seen, that you've worked on, and that you've communicated with, do you see those as marginal improvements in technology, or do you see them building stepwise changes? Like, where do you think all of the startup? How do you sort of relate all of the startups with one another? There's I could name 10 right now off the top of my head that have raised fairly substantial amounts of capital. Like, it's starting to. Well, actually, I don't want to answer for you, so I'll toss it over to you.
Yeah, I think Mo, I would like to answer this question at a little bit of a Uber trend and drill down to the startup. Would it be fair I give you a little bit of my thought? I think When it comes to Earth observation, we have to start looking this analysis of satellite imagery and other things as how we as humans analyze things, right? And we have language interfaces, we have visual interfaces, we have audio and perceptory interfaces, and then our brain has lobes of brain, which is like for math, which has for images, which is for text, which is for logic, and all of these things. I think the way artificial intelligence is converging, we are going into the world of multimodal analysis and eventually a multimodal brain for analyzing satellite or Earth observation imagery, right? And we have all fidelity of resolutions. We are talking about low resolution, high resolution. I mean, we have peripheral vision, and which is low resolution, and we have audio at different resolution to our humans. I, with the technologies such as generative AI, knowledge graphs, and RAGs learning and transformer models, we are looking at a perfect storm where multiple modalities are starting to fuse, and we'll have a sensor fusion. So, what does it mean for Earth observation on these startups, right? Number one, it's no longer okay or even viable to just use one kind of satellite imagery, whether it's hyperspectral or thermal or SAR, to be able to analyze this data. So you have to analyze from multiple sources. Number two, each source and each thing provides you some unique thing. You have to build some custom brain lobe equivalent, your secret sauce, to be analyzed that well enough. But the challenge is, um, you have to work in unison with other data sources many times to build the best of the customer use cases. So if you're a defense customer, you want like every single data source fused, basically. Now, there is a challenge and an opportunity for these startups, right? If startups are building marginally improving algorithms, let's say on SAR imagery, right? Or some startup is building computer vision algorithms on optical imagery. Those could be wiped out overnight because large language models are building these capabilities inherent, and not just large. We are in the world of ImageNet and large image models, which are now part of ChatGPT 4.0 already by design, right? So their secret sauce of being extracting information can go away, right? But I think what is still valuable is understanding a customer pain point and just building a vertical solution. Where does this lead to? Like these startups, which have raised a lot of money to build simple things, are going to find themselves challenging situation also if they don't have that customer intimacy built in, a vertically integrated customer solution built in. The other side of the coin is as the need for these multi-sensory models and multi-sensory technology goes up. I mean, we talked about consolidation in the industry and acquisitions. I mean, this is the right time for it. Like there could be large players which have customer contracts, they have primes, they have inbuilt customer intimacy, they have large sales teams which can sell it to multiple. I mean, they can acquire the small companies, which actually is a good way to get an exit. It is very, very difficult to build a point solution in a space startup and take it to an IPO. Increasingly, the acquisition by a public or private company is a great exit path, basically. So it has to be balanced, but startups have to adopt, and they have to rapidly adapt. They have to run super lean, basically, and they have to use as many building blocks as they can do. They have to work out partnership with the Earth data provider so they don't drown in the cost of getting the data. I mean, I've seen so many startups spend millions of dollars of their funding in acquiring data. And I mean, we can ways around it, like partner with the companies, give them equity stake, equity for imagery and stuff like that. Then you have much better chances of being successful. I love advising startups and happy to provide any insights if anybody ever needs in this. Yeah.
So, with regards to generative AI, large language models, I mean, we're talking a little bit more on the analysis side, right? Not on the data acquisition side. So maybe talk a little on from a practical perspective, like how is that going to ultimately impact the user, and does that open up I mean, everyone's sort of asking the question when, we've been talking, if you look at a lot of the, presentations from a couple of years ago of most of the EOs companies and startups, there's a, everyone love to break down the government versus commercial revenue, and everyone loved to show how much bigger that commercial pie was going to get over the next 5 to 10 years versus government. But ultimately, it looks like government is the lone sort of buyer right now of imagery data. So maybe talk a little bit about the tools that you're referring to. Is that going to help open up the market, especially the commercial market? Does it make things easier? Maybe talk about that.
So, two parts of the question. First is the tools such as chat GPTs or Perplexity or Mistral, how are they going to affect um, Earth observation, imagery, data analysis, number one, and how does this plays out in commercial as well as government space, right? Those Is that correct, Mo?
Sure.
Yeah. Let's take that, right? I think up until now, let's say you're building a data to analyze or count ships basically on a port, right? And you can spend few millions of dollars to train the model and deploy it and build a full product out of it. Now, there are large image models, large language models, large multimodal models which are starting to come up, which actually require billions to train, basically. But then for users to use, they're like super cheap, basically. So you could be paying like a few cents per image recognition or even lesser on bulk partnerships. What it does do is it allows rise of rapid startups. It allows formation of new use cases and things like that. So, what does that mean? For example, hey, if I'm building a new startup which does insurance underwriting, basically um, for insurance providers to determine the risk of my house using satellite imagery, right? Um, I would have to spend millions to acquire satellite imageries, train my model, deployment model, and build a vertical website or apps to sell this thing. Now, this experience is simplified. I no longer need to acquire millions of dollars of satellite training data, but I can simply use existing models, maybe fine tune them, or use racks or other technologies to augment it. But I can simply build a commercial web application with pricing plans and everything. I can hook up my startups to, you know, all these satellite imagery providers which are selling that at retail, basically. So you have Up42 as one of the examples. You have Skywatch and Skyfire, the other two, basically. And you can hook up. I can buy a location for a few hundreds of dollars for the houses I'm wanting to underwrite, and then use that pipeline of a chat GPT for service to analyze whatever is there and deliver the result for my insurance underwriter in a simple text like, hey, this house is near a brush fire, it's on the canyon, it looks like there could be some risk to it, there's a pool in the house, or some of the tiles look missing, or whatever the use things might be. What it does is it's suddenly made the cost of building the startup from needing like 10-15 million dollar funding to be able to done under 1 million, or even not even require VC funding to be raised. That does open up the market. That does accelerate the commercial use cases. I'll pause there before I reflect on the government side of the business. How does it change?
Well, before we go to the government, have you tried any of these tools?
Absolutely. So yes, I was playing with ChatGPT 4.0 and using satellite imagery, and I gave it a random imagery of a military base, or few military bases, and let's see what happens. I have no expectations what is going to happen. And the output of my results was it analyzed it. Some of its comments was, hey, it looks like a satellite imagery of a military base. Based on the architecture of building, it looks like a Russian architecture. So it could be in Russia, or it could be in the countries where Russia built such a things. Based on the topography, it looks like arid, and it looks like this part of the country, right? In the image, I can see these following aircrafts being posted. They look like a bomber of a particular class. It looks like a MiG being there, and it also looks like there's a Su 32, one of these aircrafts be done. And that's a very precise identification,
Wait, Sid,
It's
hold
a
on.
very,
I have to clarify. So you're saying that you threw a random satellite image of a military base into GPT-4o, and that is sort of the output that you got. I have to actually just stop feeling surprised these days with all of these examples, because I feel like I hear one every day where I'm like, wow. But wait, so you're saying that was the output that, and it must have been this past week, right, that you tried this?
oh, I, exactly. This is in the past week after the release of 4.0 model, basically. And the model was like really astute in identifying the scene, basically. I threw it in another imagery of a military base again, simply found by using Google image search, basically. So nothing proprietary, nothing this. And I asked it to say, analyze this second imagery. And it was like, hey, I see some trainer jets, I see some military base, I see a bomber park being there. I actually cross-referenced with the information available on the web, and it looks like this particular region in Russia, basically. So it was very, very precise in correlating, and it used the archive of web of all the available imageries to pinpoint which the imagery are. Now, these are the native capabilities which are not even fine-tuned. And this is like a relatively cut, copy, paste prompt engineering. Imagine what could happen when you are able to integrate these models into software in a much more systematic way.
Right. So who becomes a winner here? Is it the software provider? Is it the acquirer of the data? Is it what part of the stack? I know across Earth observation is the big winner in your mind, given what you're describing.
Well, it's a complex question, right? But firstly, there are new players in the stack, right? The stack is opening up beyond the space industry. So you're going to find players such as NVIDIA, Amazon, Microsoft, Google cloud providers, as well as large image models such as, OpenAI or, Anthropic or other players starting to get the pie of it, right? But then if you think about, hey, you can build all these applications, who's going to take it to the market, basically, right? And these are going to be the large players such as Airbus or my former employers or Black Sky or some of these other players which have customer intimacy, right? Which have customer established contracts. They are going to be winners, right? You will also see people, the companies like Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin, and others, which have other parts of the stack and they are prime providers starting to win. This is on the defense side, basically, right? I think it's increasingly very, very difficult for small startups to crack into defense and intelligence worlds. Like they will often build custom applications, which now could be built by even larger players for a very little cost. So there's less incentive to partner sometimes there. But on the commercial side, the biggest winner is, and even on defense side, the biggest winner is customer, basically. I will give you two commercial and what it call it defense use cases. Like the first commercial use case, imagine, hey, I'm a CEO of a solar system installation company or even Tesla Solar, division. And I want to know what are the good markets to go after to send my salespeople or send a direct communication to the customers, to install solars. And what are those good markets? Like where there's plenty of sunlight, when there's other people have installed solar, but the neighbors have not installed solar, so there's penetration, those markets are affluent. You can do these identification immediately using satellite imagery and generative AI models. Basically, you can get exact answer. Hey, go and target these zip codes because we see there's already a movement where people are installing solars, but the penetration is still low, right? On the defense side, imagine you're a analyst or a mid-level military officer in Japanese Navy, and you go in front of your computer or software and say, "Hey, please provide me the situation report in from last 24 hours," and the system says, "Hi, like I have been analyzing satellite imagery from multitude of sources. I see a movement of ships from a country X going from port A to port B. I saw 5 new kind of ships in the caravan, which is unusual. They look like military ships. There's a military formation. There's a resupply vessel. I have increased the frequency of tasking of satellites in that area from every week to every 2 days. Please approve this request, and I'll continue to monitor the situation, and I'll give you alerts as soon as new data is available. Now that's the kind of use case which has suddenly very become. So I'm big. Like we are going towards a world where geospatial is going to become just like programming and just like other languages which we use. I think it's going to be taught in high schools very soon. It is going to be just weather data will continue to use this other modus operandi to know more about our earth and make decisions. End of the day, customer is the winner, whether it's a commercial or defense customer.
Do you think satellite imagery will become commoditized?
It is bound to become commoditized to a certain extent. But I do want to call a differentiation there. Satellite imagery comes in many resolutions and many sizes. So think about planet was 3 to 5 meters resolution in past, and then there's sub 1 meter resolution between 100 centimeter and 50 centimeter. Then there's a higher resolution, which is 50 centimeter to 10 centimeter. The highest resolution or ultra high resolution, call it 50 centimeter, 10 centimeter, those satellites still going to cost tens or hundreds of millions to launch. So it would not be hyper commoditized, but there are more players like Albedo's launching a 10 centimeter satellite imagery, right? So there are balance. So that will be the middle band, which is 50 centimeter to 100 sub-meter imagery. That's tons of satellite launches. And guess what? When you bring these millions of data points of satellite imagery, they're not for human consumptions. They're good for machines. And it is based on experiments, machines are really good up until like 85 centimeters of resolution, right? So you don't need to be ultra high resolution sometimes. So that middle segment is going to be hyper commoditized. And then there is a segment beyond that, which is not finding as much value, at least in my opinion. So, um, you know, that's probably going to be not too many players there, which is low resolution.
Uh, at what point do you think imagery quality improvements start to not make sense versus market need? Because image quality will start to get improved. People will figure out better ways to do it, better sort of hardware, flying closer to Earth, lots of different things that will do an attempt to improve imagery quality. But at what point do you think, hey, this is not necessary anymore? We don't need to see, the guy's bald spot from space.
So more hidden in your question basically is also the volume question basically, right? We did an experiment where we calculated F score. It's a terminology of how good machine learning algorithms recognize things out of satellite imagery and the resolution of satellite imagery. And we plotted them. We found out that somewhere between 70 to 80 centimeters resolution, that's the sweet spot, right? You could have 70, 80 centimeter resolution imagery, and this is incredibly good enough to be analyzed by machines, basically. So you sometimes don't even need to go lower than that for, I would say, 90% of the use cases, basically. If and that's good enough. But then there's no end to human curiosity, both for commercial needs as well as defense and intelligence needs, to be able to look deeper into what exactly is going on. And at that point, there's always going to be a need for 30 centimeter resolution, 10 centimeter resolution imagery, 5 centimeter resolution imagery, to go for these very penetrated, very deep things. End of the day, we should not forget, space is kind of like international waters. Anybody can image almost anything, and that provides an unprecedented opportunity if you can do that at the highest resolution. So it's not going away. There's a need for it, but it's not 90% of the market. It's probably 10% of specialized use cases, which could be most valuable, by the way.
So a couple final questions. One, which is, if you had $1 million, let's just say you're managing $1 million to invest. invest specifically in the space industry, how much of that million is going into EO and EO related technologies today, starting today? And Sid, I know you're
So,
not I know you're not a professional investor per se, but just I'm trying to get a sense of how you view the industry versus, or how you view EO within the confines of the space industry at large in terms of growth and opportunity.
well, I do actually invest and have been actively investing in a number of startups and, as an angel investor and seed investor. And actually we have put together a fund called 5U Ventures, which I do participate in it. But to give it a specific answer, um, Earth observation industry is not the easiest industry to penetrate. If I'm deploying $1 million, I'll probably deploy 20-25% in the Earth observation, but also deploy that remaining 75% in a diversified strategy in other parts of the space industry. And let me call out one specific area which is quite valuable. When you're in the industry which is built, let's think AI race, right? Why is NVIDIA winning? NVIDIA is building shovels and pickles, to dig the gold in AI industry. And I think the same approach does apply to Earth observation and the industry. There's the race, and who are the players who are going to win in this race? Basically, of course, there's a vertical apps and Earth observation players, but there are also players who are going to build buses to build these all satellites, right? People who will build common technologies, such as maybe large platforms to process all this data, right? Or some of these things. I will certainly invest another 25% in this to 30% in the areas where people are building the shovels and pickles to help accelerate this industry.
Are there any Earth observation startups that you want to highlight as, hey, these are the ones I'm really paying attention to or spending time on?
Um, you know, there are two which are very interesting to me. I think I'll call out. There's one is Apex. Basically, they're building the bus basically, and they're trying to commoditize the bus so you can put any kind of payload on that bus basically. And I think Apex is something to look after. They are trying to build the you know commoditized bus to the market, and this will help multitude of startups and even big players as they want to launch satellites. The another one is XT-Link Labs. It's a India/US based company. XT Labs is in the business of building sovereign constellations for different governments. Now, because the cost of building constellation is coming down, a lot of countries are thinking, why not just launch our own sub-meter constellation? Why we can own it, we can point it wherever we want, and we have access to it, no matter what rest of the geopolitical situation or war situation in the world. And I think that trend is going to come up, and companies like XC-Link, which will give constellation as a service to different countries, are going to be valuable. So I do plan to invest part of my um, imaginary $1 million fund, or I should say, real 1 million plus, into these companies.
Yep. Well, Sid, it's been a pleasure. Really appreciate you being on the show, and super insightful and also exciting, at least for the customer. Very exciting future. I mean, I know today you can go and spend less than $1,000 pretty much to task a satellite and take a picture of virtually any place on Earth except maybe say missile silos. But I actually did this recently for an event. I tasked a satellite to take a picture of Santa Monica, and I presented and said, look, I acquired this data in like 2 days, 48 hours. And, what does that future look like in 5 years, especially with the tools that you're describing? It's pretty exciting.
I agree with you, Mo. I'll very recent observation. There's a startup called Atlas Pro AI, which I've advised, and they're building a system for telecommunication industry where these providers can actually task a satellite and see what's going on with their telecom projects in commercial space with like less than $1,000, right? Anytime they want to see. So whether it's commercial or defense, this is an exciting world. The pie is going to grow for mankind. And I think Earth observation is going to become a crucial part of it, basically. In fact, not just Earth observation, the space industry is going to grow. I'm hyper excited about the time where you have thousands of satellites giving you real-time information, almost like internet of space. But you also have capabilities such as generative AI to write code to build new satellites or software, and even generative hardware tools to come, which will build these building blocks to be able to pitch launch satellites. I think we are at a phenomenal point in human race where the space is going to go on an exponential trajectory, and we can build more spacecraft, we can launch spacecraft for cheaper, and I would say space or galaxies are the limit. We are in the accelerated zone in the final frontier.
Well, very well said, Sid. Until next time, thanks for being on the show.
Until next time, always a pleasure.